This is a Lazy Teacher Podcast.
Welcome back to the Lazy Teacher Podcast. My name is Brian Pulowski. This is episode 20, English Language Learners. My guest today is Adriana Vazquez. She's a teacher on special assignment focusing on English language learners in a school district of roughly 82% Hispanic students. We talked about how the English language program works, how a student reclassifies out of the program, and a unique type of class called dual language immersion. You might be surprised at what type of parents really want their child in that class. We jump right into the conversation with what the main purpose of her position is.
So my main purpose and my role is to provide professional development to all of our teachers, TK-12. For elementary is pretty much the idea of integrated and designated ELD, which means the integrated is language literacy supports throughout the entire day, the elementary day, and then our designated ELD supports, which is that ELD block, that 30 to 45 minutes that our teachers are doing in the classroom. For secondary, it looks a little different because integrated ELD supports means literacy supports in the students' content classes, which is their math class. So what kind of literacy supports are we providing in a math class, in a science class, in a social studies class? And then the designated ELD support is an actual class. It's their ELD block. And this is the ELD block that all of our English learners have to take until they reclassify.
Now, is that specifically just secondary, or is that all the way down at our elementary levels
So
too?
Elementary and secondary, they all have integrated and designated ELD supports. However, the difference in elementary is that the ELD block happens anytime when the teacher says, okay, this is my ELD time, my 30 to 45 minutes. In secondary, it's actually the 50 to 60 minute block that secondary teachers have. So 6 through 12 students have that 50, 60 minute ELD time.
What class would that be in? Is that like a language class?
That is an ELD class. That is what it's called, ELD block.
Oh, I see. And so the EL students have they have an EL class?
An ELD block,
An ELD
yes.
block. And that's 60 minutes?
Yeah, 50, 60, depending on the site. Some sites have 50, 55 minutes. Whatever period it is, period time it is, that's what their ELD class is. So they take this in addition to their English class. So they'll take their English 9, English 10, literature, whatever it is that they're taking for English, and then they take ELD block in addition to that. And something very cool that we have going on for some of our middle schools where we have a high number of long-term English learners is the Avid Excel class, which is, again, it happens during their ELD time. However, these are specific strategies to provide academic language supports because our long-term English learners who are students who have been in the program for more than 6 years, 5 or 6 years, they are kind of stuck in the EL program per se. And the reason being is because they have the social language. And these are the students that you and I would confuse by saying, no, they speak English. They know English. They're just like not trying. Well, these students do know, but they know the social English. And so they are lacking the academic language to access the literature, to access their science, to access. So this Avid Excel class provides them with those structures to acquire academic language at a faster pace so that they can do better in the rest of their class. And they can find
Now, are all EL students in this Avid Excel class?
No, this is a very specific. We have it at 2 middle schools, and this is very specific to long-term English learners, students who have been in the EL program for 5 or 6 more years.
Okay, so that's what identifies long-term as 5 or 6 years. Now, is there an average of, because I know they could be exited from the EL program,
yes.
correct? Mm-hmm. Is there an average time that students typically get exited by, or not necessarily?
So yes, so that's why they are referred to officially by the state at 6 or more years. So if a student has been in the program for 6 or more years, then that means they're long terms because they've gotten stuck in the program. But average is about 1, as long as wherever the students came in, as long as they have made progress 1 performance level a year, that's adequate progress. So let's say we have a kindergarten student who came in, he's a level 1. Say by 4th, 5th grade, he should be ready to reclassify. However, we have kindergarten students already reclassifying, so they just acquire the language fast enough and they reclassify within a year. So they started, let's say, level 2 and they went to level 4 or 5 within that academic year, and so they reclassify. So it really depends on the student's progress.
What's the range of levels? Level 1 to 5?
Yes. So I'm so glad you're asking this question because we have sunsetted the CELT assessment, and that's statewide. And so CELT is no longer and the assessment that we will be using, which provided us with levels 1 through 5. So 1 being beginning and 5 being advanced. Now we are actually, as we speak, we are doing our very first summative LPAC assessment, which is the new language assessment that California will be using for students. And this will actually generate different proficiency levels, and it's going to be 4. So we're going to be looking at 4 overall scores and 3 proficiency level descriptors. And so it's going to be emerging, expanding, and bridging. So emerging being our very emerging, so level 1, some 2s, and then the bridging would be our high performing EL students, and bridging would actually tell us, okay, they're ready to reclassify. So then that's when we can, once a student gets to the bridging level, then we can start considering for reclassification, given that they have met all the other criteria.
Now, there's a lot that goes into this, but overall, they're looking at 3 things: language assessments, academic assessments, and parental input. Has a parent ever not supported reclassification?
To be honest, we have never had that, but we definitely do want to make sure that our student that is actually a guideline that the state has set forth. So that's one of the pillars of reclassification. We need to make sure that our parents are in the know and it part of the decision making. So that's pretty much what it is. It's just part of the decision making. In the past, many years ago, when I had just started this role, I had a lot of parents come to me when I was a bilingual facilitator telling me, I never knew that my student reclassified, and they've been reclassified for 4 or 5 years, and I never got a letter. I never got, any notification. So that's why, for many years now, we've had that very, that protocol that we need to make sure that our parents are part of that reclassification process. Well, in the past, it was just, I'm talking many years ago. In the past, it was a lot of if the parents didn't show up, I guess it's okay. We just continue with the reclassification process because it's something good for our students, right? It's something positive for our students. So like you said, just right now, I can't imagine any parent saying no to it. So it was kind of like we assumed that it was okay that parents, that parents were going to be okay with it. And we just did the paperwork with or without, notifying the parent, making sure that our parents knew. Yeah, we would send out a letter and say, your student is, a candidate for reclassification. But now we either have to have for sure, 100%, we have to have a parent, even if they can't show up for the meeting, we need to make sure that we contacted the parents, that they agreed over the phone, just to make sure that our parents are, again, aware where their students are and their accomplishment.
Yeah, I would imagine, it's almost consent. You almost have to have consent to get them out? Or?
Yes. And then a lot of our wonderful schools are actually going above and beyond and now having little ceremonies and certificates of reclassification, and just so that the parents and students know, this is not just another cool thing. This is something to celebrate about. You actually demonstrated you came in with very limited language proficiency, and now you're a full, you're considered proficient in the English language show.
Yeah, for sure. Now let's go to the reverse side. Is there ever a situation where a parent would not want their child in the EL program? Is there a stigma to it? Is it like a pull out where the rest of the class is going to see students leaving? They're like, well, why is that kid leaving?
There are some parents that hear what we find a lot is, oh, this mom told me or this friend told me that it wasn't good because of this and that and because they're in this class. But to be honest, when we have conversations with parents who are a little nervous about having their students in an SEI class per se, we really work hard to educate our parents and anybody really who has that small little concern that no, these are extra supports that their students are needing. And so we work with the parents, and to be honest, for any of the conversations we've had, by the end, when we show them like this is where they are, this is where they were, this is the progress they're making, these are the supports that they're receiving, then parents feel like, oh no, it's actually a good thing, like they have a bilingual aide working with them when it fits, whatever other supports they have, they're receiving these 30, 45 minutes, and secondary, this full hour of just intensive language supports. Then when the parents see it that way, they're like, oh, okay, so it makes sense.
Adriana explained that in the English language program, everything is taking place in the child's classroom.
It's all integrated. So it's that SEI, which is structured immersion. So the students are in the class. We're not pulling kids outside, go get your 30 minutes. The 30 minutes happen within. And there's a reason why all of our teachers at the elementary level are required to teach those 30 to 45 minutes, depending on administration preference, and same in secondary. The kids are not being pulled out. But yes, you're right. That was my experience when I was an English learner. When I was going through elementary, I was pulled out, and I remember as a little kid, like I didn't want to miss out on my teacher's great lesson because I had to go read this novel with my bilingual aide, which I loved my bilingual aide too. But I remember going through having that conflict.
So I like that it's inclusion in the classroom. And that's kind of what I've seen with the EL program is it's neat. The bilingual aide comes in, and of course they're paying attention to the EL students, but every student is benefiting from it. And as a teacher, I love it. It's nice to have another aide in the classroom. And I like how the EL program works it, where it's in the classroom. There's no pull out.
Right. And to be honest, the kids are hardly ever aware of the fact that they're in a different name of the class. Like that doesn't come up in the school setting. Even teachers. I mean, we know as teachers, we know what we're teaching, right? SEI, ELM, GATE. But the students don't realize, oh, there's a difference between ELM and SEI. It's really the parents a lot of the times, the ones that bring in a little bit of the concern because they're hearing it from other parents. Oh, he's in that class or she's in that class. And so they start drawing conclusions about this must mean this and this must mean that. But I find I love working with parents, and I find so much power in just really sitting down. Let me hear what you have to say. Tell me what your perceptions are about whatever it is that we're talking about, and let's have a conversation, and let's talk about it, and let me give you my perspective, and let me give you what research says, and then we come to a consensus. And most often than not, it's been really nice conversations of like, oh, I didn't know all these supports were in place, or I didn't know, all this instruction it was happening.
Yeah, it's easy for a parent to not quite understand how good the program actually is for their child. Do you have an opinion on like different schools, whether they have separate classes or not? Like our school does not. We don't have SEI. We don't have a GATE class. I don't know if there's other schools in the district that have that. Do you have an opinion? Do you think it benefits the child to be in, all the kids are all in one class?
So it's been our tradition to, and not just tradition, but it's been the state's, requirement that we do have that SEI at like the limited proficiency and when the students are proficient. And so those have been identified as our SEI and ELM classes. Now with this whole restructuring of our new accountability system, there have been a lot of changes at the state level. And so what they have allowed is for exploration to see what other programs or what other classroom settings may be beneficial for our students. And so one of them being that is just heterogeneous. Let's just put all of our students based regardless of whatever program participation they are participating on. Let's just try to see that there's actually a lot of great information on that on our ELA ELD framework. And so there is research that shows that when done right, that is a very beneficial setting for our students. However, the reason why we have been very cautious at the district level to say, oh, for sure, let's go for it, let's try that, is because we need to really think about what are we ready for that shift being. Are we ready as teachers to service our level 1 students, EL students, and our level 5s, and our GATE students, and our special ed students, and all of these typologies, all of these students who may have different needs? We want to just make sure we're cautious in that sense, because we need to make sure that the capacity has been built so that a teacher can differentiate for all of those levels.
Yeah, it's about meeting the needs of the kids.
Yeah.
I completely understand what you're saying. It's a tricky thing. How do you meet the needs of level 1? So level 1 would be like can barely speak English, right?
Newcomer, just came in, or barely speaking.
And so with the mix model, so to speak, you could have a level 1 along with a high-performing gifted student type of thing in the same classroom. And it's tricky as a teacher. How do you meet the needs of them? I mean, that's essentially what you're saying,
yes,
right?
Yes.
No, I feel you. And as they get into secondary education, I mean, there is kind of differentiation anyways. It's like if you're in the, high math class and I'm not ready for the high math class, I'm not in the high math class, I'm in a lower class. So, I could see both sides of it. Why not start that at the elementary level? I mean, I know it's separation of kids, but I mean, like you said, the kids don't really know, and you're doing it to meet the kids. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Meet their needs.
I just was reading an article and I loved it because it said something about, it was talking about it's not tracking the kids, it's really grouping the kids based on their needs. So using that idea of we're grouping them based on what they need, and for example, for secondary, that's just compliancy. Like we need to make sure that our EL students are receiving their ELD blocks. So just talking in a secondary and having heterogeneous grouping, that probably would not be feasible in that sense, because we're still required to provide our students ELD.
You see, the way that the state holds us accountable has changed. There's now a new way of monitoring the EL students' progress. They use an LP.
There are 3 criteria for the LP.
What's the LP stand for?
English Learner Progress Indicator.
English Language Progress. Okay, gotcha. The 3 criteria basically break down to this. How many students went up 1 proficiency level, how many students maintained at their level, and the number of students that get reclassified.
So just to put it in perspective,
Thank you.
we have 100 students here, right,
Okay.
at this school.
Gotcha.
So let's say out of those 100 students, 50 of those students went up a band. So there's 50%. Okay. Then 10 of those students maintained a proficiency level, like proficient or advanced. So that's 60%. Then 15 of your total 100 EL students reclassified. So that's 60 plus 15, 75. So that would be your percentage. That would be this school's percentage, 75%.
Okay. That was a really good example. That makes a lot of sense.
That's just out of 100. That's what I...
Of course. But that's exactly how you should give an example out of 100. So is that a goal for a school or a goal for the district?
So it's the goal. So again, you're going to have each individual school already. We actually, if you go to like California dashboard on the web, we already have how every school did and how the district did. And so really the goals that are going to be set are going to be based on where the school currently is. So let's say your school is at an 85%. Your goal is not going to look the same as Bethune Elementary, for example, because they may have a higher or lower percentage. So we don't want to say everybody needs to be at 90%, right? It's just your goals are going to be progressive based on where your starting point is. up.
Who sets those goals?
So there is a formula. It's so funny you ask, because we were just working on this morning. There's a formula that the county has provided, and so the principals will soon be getting some kind of table as a suggestion. So this is where you are. This is where you'd like to be next year, and then the following year, and the following year. But truly, it's going to be a collaboration between principals and the district to make sure that everybody is in a comfortable place where, this is what we think as a site. This is what we want our goal to be. So it's not going to be set for you. These are all things that are discussed at school site council meetings, and so if everyone needs to be part of this conversation. It's not just the county, it's not the state telling the county telling the districts telling the sites. No, it's going to be a conversation that's going to be happening with all the stakeholders.
Okay. And so as a parent, I want to go on to that website and I want to see how my child's school is doing. Like what would you say what percentage they're doing? Does it break it down into the three sections?
Into the three, so there's a grid for each of the indicators. So for all of the 8 indicators, you're going to have a different grid. And then you're going to see where your school is at for each of the indicators. Okay.
What band, is that what you called it? Moving up a band?
For going back to LP, yes.
Yeah. So for LP, there was, if I can remember correctly, I was trying to write it down. There's 3 things. You can either go up a band, maintain a band,
or reclassify.
Thank you. So I'm a parent, I go onto the website for LP and I want to see how my school is doing. And I see 75%. Is there a way it could be broken down to see, does it break it down for the parent or anyone?
Mm-hmm.
It does.
So they'll go and click on the school site, and then on the right-hand side, it'll print out, it'll give them an Excel spreadsheet kind of thing, and then it'll tell them, it'll actually, I want to say, and don't quote me on this, but I think it goes back to the 2 or even 3 years back. So then the parents can see the movement, which is another cool piece about the accountability, and that's for all indicators. We're not only measured based on how we did this year, we're measured based on change. So those colors that I was telling you about, you want to make adequate progress going up, but you also want to, over the years, improve. Okay, so it's change and status. How did we do this year? And how has our change been?
Oh, I see. So it's not, you don't necessarily have to score high to move up. You could have a big growth, huge jump. Okay. Do they look at growth over time?
Yes.
They do.
So they compare, there's always a 2-year comparison.
Okay. So like with a school that had 65, they go from 65 to 69 to 70, like slow growth, but they're growing.
Beautiful.
Versus a school that, maybe flatlines a little bit and then has like a big jump. Is it better to have growth over time or stay status and then just go to a big jump one year?
So I would say perspective-wise, I think both, wherever there's growth, the state is always going to count it as a positive. However, perspective-wise, I think, in my very humble opinion, that does not have to be anybody else's opinion, but I think slow and steady growth is adequate, just because it shows that you're doing things little by little, whereas what happened this last year? Not that that's bad, that's actually pretty good. Like, let's go learn from that school. But I have seen in my research that I've done, I have seen other districts, because we've been doing a lot of this work with even just looking at, other districts, and there are schools that make huge growth, but then, okay, what happens after that? Progress.
Yeah, they're both progress, and even if they both end up in the same spot, I think I'd rather see slow growth.
Slow and steady.
Yeah, and steady.
Then huge jump and then stop, or go down the next year.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, absolutely. So to get the kids to grow, I know our district has a dual immersion program, right? Is that across does every school have that, or how does that work?
So the dual immersion program is part of our English learner program. However, it's really offered to all of our students. So it's not just specific to our English learner program. Yeah. So we have the dual immersion program. We are going on our 4th year. So excited. It actually is only being hosted at one site, one of our district sites. And the reason being is there's a lot of research out there. We actually, before we opened up our DLI program, we did 1 year's worth of research before we even open one door. And the reason being is we wanted to make sure that we did what was right for our students, for our parents, for our community, for our school district. And so one of the things, one of the big pointers through our research was start slow and make sure that you can maintain that one program at that school site. And it's very common practice that other districts, that's what they do. They start with 1 or 2 school sites at the most, and then they grow based on, parent requests and whatnot. Okay. We actually have a lot of parents who are so eager. They call us, yes, I want my child in a dual immersion program. They're in 3rd grade. And so again, research, we have the 90-10 model. So there's different models. There's different dual immersion program models. We have adopted the 90-10 model. And what that means is in kindergarten, students start with 90% of their instructional day is in Spanish, and 10% of it is in English. And then every year it progresses to 80% Spanish, 20% English. The following year, 70% Spanish, 30% English, and so on. By the time our students are in 4th grade, they'll be 50% English, 50% of their instructional day will be in Spanish. So 50-50. And so for that reason, what research and studies and just there's so much research around it that we have to start our students. It's cohorts. It's really what it is. So our students have to start at kinder, and then they go up with their entire cohort.
Yeah, I was going to ask that. It has to be a cohort, right? Mm-hmm. So let's say this year, whatever, my son is in kindergarten, but he's not in that program. When it goes on to 1st grade, could my son go into the program now that it's offered in 1st grade?
So we have accepted some students who have come in first grade. The only thing we need to make sure is that they have the adequate language proficiency for that grade, and that's for the benefit of the child, for nobody else's. The thing is, you think about those kindergarten students who had all this foundation in Spanish, right? And then they're already in 1st grade. You have all of these students are already communicating in Spanish. They're reading Spanish. They're doing math in Spanish. And then you have this student who does not have any kind of Spanish foundation. And then you put them in this setting. You can only imagine what that English-only speaking families are so excited about the program. They are knocking down our doors to have their kiddos join the program. So much interest on our English only community. On our Spanish community, Spanish speaking community, it actually that's very hard to actually get. Our Spanish speaking parents, bilingual parents, like you mentioned, they are very nervous about having their students come in and learn in a Spanish setting, because their number one goal is for their kids to go into school and learn English. That's the goal. And so when you talk to them about oh yeah, do you want your students to be bilingual and 90% Spanish their 1st year, we have a lot of parents that get very nervous about it. No. I will teach them Spanish. You go ahead and do the English side.
I didn't even think about that.
Yes, it's so common, and it's just throughout. There's so much research about it. And so we do a lot of work around that, making sure that we educate our parents, literally when we're recruiting and passing out flyers, we're oh, are you interested in a bilingual program for your kiddo? And then they're no, thank you. And then I'm saying, no, it's not just speaking, 2 languages, is they will be able to read, it's full by literacy. And then when you start talking to the parents about the fact that they'll be able to read, write, communicate fully in both languages, and that's when they start, listening like, oh, tell me more. And so, but yeah, it takes one at a time, literally one parent at a time to sit down. We have informational meetings, and we really want to make sure for every single parent that joins the program, their kids, they are fully aware of what this program entails and the commitment that is required, because that's another thing we let our parents know. This is not a 1-2 year program. If you start your student in kindergarten, at least they need to do this or be participating in this program at least their entire elementary educational career, because again, for the benefit of the child, what would happen if you have this up until 2nd grade and then you yank them out of this dual immersion setting and then you put them in an English only, right? So this student has a lot of foundation in Spanish, and then you put them into, and so there'll be some struggles for the students who have been learning in Spanish primarily, and then they're required to do everything in English.
Yeah, so if they're entering into 2nd grade, they're used to an 80-20, right? Yeah, so that's a huge challenge. What happens after elementary school?
So we, of course, right now we're opening the doors for 3rd grade, but we definitely have some plans in place. We want to make sure that we have that bridge for secondary, and so we're toying with ideas of offering, not toying, definitely we want to make sure that we have in advanced levels of Spanish in middle school, because the Spanish beginning or Spanish, even Spanish for Spanish speakers for native speakers is not going to do it for our dual immersion students. They're very advanced, by the way, and what research has told us too, and just local research, not just the big, studies, is that by 3rd grade, this is what local research has told us, by 3rd grade, our dual immersion students are outperforming their monolingual peers. But what official research tells us, like research you'll find in books and articles, is that by 8th grade, they are definitely outperforming all of their monolingual students. And so, going back to the thought of what are we doing for middle and high school, we want to make sure that we offer a high level, advanced levels of Spanish. We're thinking maybe for high school, a computer science class in Spanish, speaking of that global learning, globalization, and 21st century learning, and making sure that we're not just, yes, we have these opportunities to create biliteracy in our students, but also that, that global, learning, like communicate with other, in other languages.
Is the academics need to be at a higher level then when they get into middle school, high school?
We definitely want to make sure that at least the Spanish classes are definitely at higher levels, something like Spanish literature versus just like, let's learn the grammar, because the kids will have had that. As far as the rest of the classes, like a computer science class would be the same, on par with what, our high school students are receiving, but it would be in Spanish so that they get, or a business class in Spanish. How cool would that be? Common practice is that in middle schools, they for sure have a science class in Spanish, a math class in Spanish, because that's, especially like math, that's very universal. And the students usually come with a lot of foundational math terminology already from elementary. And so it would be an easy transition to have something like that in middle and high schools.
So are these students that are coming through this program, are they stuck in the program when they go into middle school?
No, they're not. It will definitely be, it's always a choice program. It always is. But no, when they get to middle school, it's a choice program. If these students want to continue participating in these classes, we definitely want to make sure that we have these classes available to them. But, if they want to take just a regular, master schedule that's being provided, that's perfectly fine.
That's so cool. Is there a negative to being in the program? Like, it sounds like, well, at least at the elementary level, if you start in kindergarten you kind of need to stay with the program at least through elementary. I don't know if that's a negative, but I mean, there's kind of like a crutch to that. Like, you're in the program, but you kind of have to understand you're committing to.
Yes.
Is there anything else that goes with it?
The other piece that we have seen, and we're starting to see that, but we are being very proactive with it, is by the time our students get to third grade, that's the grade when our students start getting identified for GATE. And so again, just local research that we've done with our neighboring districts immediately, especially starting districts, the parents get really, really nervous and they say, oh, no, I need to move my kid out of DLI and I'm going to put him into a GATE class. That's definitely something that parents feel like heartbroken about. Which one, DLI or GATE? Most often than not, they truly come back to DLI is what our neighboring districts have shared with us. However, we are being very proactive about it, and we actually just came back from our GATE conference, and we took our DLI teachers to this GATE conference because we want to make sure we educate parents that being in a GATE class doesn't necessarily mean a huge difference other than you're differentiating for your gifted learners through these, great strategies. And so we're equipping our teachers with these great strategies, these strategies that are good for gifted learners so that we appease our parents and say, look, they don't have to sacrifice one or the other.
Okay. Well, let's say if a parent's interested in this program, wants to learn more, is there somewhere they can go?
Sure. We have on the website, on our district website.
So they can go to our website. That'd be valverde.edu.
And then under parents, there's a parent tab to scroll all the way down. I think it's currently the second to the last one, and it's DLI. And so they'll click there. There's a lot of information about a program. We have our master plan. We have our interest forms if they wanted to fill one out so that we can contact them when we have recruitment meetings. There's a couple of slide decks that tell them about the program, very, very basic information. We have some pictures of, just current pictures of our DLI kiddos and teachers in action. So.
And how about social network for the EL program? Anything like people want to stay up to date with what's going on with our district? Do you guys have any social network?
Sure. Yep. We have the same Valverde website. We have our EL specific website. We upload tons of stuff there. It's very robust. We have a lot of information about just our basic program, but we also have professional development and things for our parents. And we also have our Twitter, which is at VVUSD_EL. That's where we kind of tweet and retweet all the wonderful things that our teachers are doing in the classroom, especially when they tag us. We just love it, love it, love it. That they've tried one of the strategies that we shared at our CCLs or professional development dates.
I love following you guys on Twitter because you guys are constantly retweeting what other teachers are doing, and it gives me great ideas. So I'm way into that. Yeah, it's super cool.
Me too. I love it. I love seeing what teachers are doing in the classroom. It just makes my heart smile.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Well, thank you, Adriana. Thank you for coming in today.
Well, thank you so very much. This is an excellent experience. Thank you so much.
Well, that's going to do it for our show today. I'd like to thank Adriana Vazquez for representing for the English Language Learners Program. I also want to give a big shout out to those of you that have been leaving me ratings and reviews on the iTunes. It really helps out the show. If you have an idea for a future episode, shoot me an email. It's Brian@thelazyteacherpodcast.com. I hope you got what you came for. See ya!